Hey, Jen. Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here at Nuxt Nation. And I am super excited to be a part of this conference, especially with Nuxt 3 stable being released earlier. That was super cool to be a part of that. And I know all of you are excited to be here for that as well. As mentioned a moment ago, my name is Daniel Kelly. I am the lead instructor at Vue School, but I have a lot to dive into today. So let me jump past the intro here and let's get into leveling up Nuxt from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3. Now, I know you've heard a lot about Nuxt already today, and some of the concepts I cover might have been covered in a little bit more detail, and certainly will be probably some tomorrow. But in this talk, I really wanted to give a high-level overview of kind of comparing Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3. All right. So first of all, Nuxt 2 was or is built in Vue, and it's all centered around Vue, right? Which is great. We all love Vue. It's the templating language for all of your views, VIEWS in Nuxt, and it's also what provides that dynamic front end where you have all the different things happening on the client side, right? So that's in Nuxt version 2. But in Nuxt version 3, of course, now we are working with Vue 3. So just by working with Vue 3, Nuxt automatically gets all of these things that you see here on the screen. We've got increased performance. We've got TypeScript support. Now, TypeScript to me in Nuxt 3 is a really great feature. The reason being, if you aren't already using TypeScript or if you aren't comfortable using TypeScript yet, opening up a Nuxt 3 project and coding in JavaScript is fine, but then you can add in a little TypeScript here and there as you desire. It's really a good gateway to learning TypeScript if you have never worked with TypeScript before, because you don't have to worry about like the configuration. You don't have to worry about getting the compilation set up and all that. It just works out of the box with Nuxt 3. All you have to do is add that .ts extension to the end of a file, or have lang equals ts on your Vue components. So if you want to learn more about TypeScript and you have a Nuxt 3 project, I definitely suggest that you play around and dabble with it. And of course, being in Vue 3, we also get the composition API. Okay, so another thing that's important with Nuxt, and a reason a lot of you are probably using Nuxt to begin with, is because of the universal rendering, right? We kind of heard that during the last panel. This is really the best option for rendering Vue on the server side. And this universal rendering provides you with a number of different things. It's better performance because you don't have to wait for the browser to run your JavaScript application. It's improved SEO. Because web crawlers can directly index the page's content. I might add it's also great for social sharing, right? You get the little card previews and things like that. And it also enables static site generation because we can take that rendering out of the request time and do it at a build time prior to deploying your site. So all this, of course, you get with Nuxt 2. But with Nuxt 3, we really level up this universal rendering with several different things. First of all, we're no longer talking about just running Node apps on servers, on Node servers, right? In today's era, the serverless architecture is becoming more and more prevalent. And Nuxt 3 is really built to take advantage of that, right? We can run in Dino, we can run in service workers, we can run in Cloudflare workers, and we can do it all with super fast cold start times. So Nuxt 3 is just leveled up where we can actually deploy our app and how we can deploy it. But to me, one of the really exciting features of Nuxt 3 when it comes to rendering is its ability to hybrid render your site. That means you can choose different rendering modes per route. And this is what that looks like, okay? So inside of your Nuxt config file, you can set this route rules configuration object, And essentially, you provide it different routes. So it's like /blog and everything under blog, /articles and everything under articles. And then you can say exactly how you want that page to be rendered or those routes to be rendered. Okay, so for blog here, we're telling it to render the page the very first time on the server that is requested. So visitor 1 makes a request for /blog/123, and the server actually processes something. But every time after that, a cached file is delivered. So it keeps your site super fast. And then it does refresh in the background. I think I figured out this was about a minute where it refreshes. So it serves the cache thing for a minute, and then it revalidates after a minute. But everybody is getting the cached version except for the very first visitor. You can also do static rendering. So the very first time that it's requested, you have the process. But literally every single time after that, it's always served from the cache, and it's never refreshed. Okay, this is great for pages that are going to be static and not change a lot. You could even see down here on line 10, you could even have some routes be completely client-side rendered. And then if you want to use the typical universal mode, you just don't have to add anything to these route rules. Okay, so it's really cool. You can really tailor-made your site to perform differently depending on the route. All right. By the way, I wrote an article about this a couple of weeks ago, and if you're into this, or if you want to know more information about hybrid rendering in Nuxt 3, I definitely recommend you check out this article. It's on Vue School IO's blog. All right. All right. So we also get zero config deployments with Nuxt. That means I can deploy to hosts like Netlify, Vercel, or Cloudflare without really even doing anything. Some of these take a little bit minimal amount of configuration, but yeah, you can push your Nuxt out there and it will deploy, and you don't have to fuss with any settings. It's really a great experience. All right, so let's take a look now and compare the tooling we had with Nuxt 2 to what we get in Nuxt 3. In Nuxt 2, you had Webpack for bundling and running your development server, and you had a limited CLI for doing things like booting up your dev server, building for production, generating a static site, and so on. All right. But with Nuxt 3, now we're working with Vite under the hood for your development server. Now, for me, this is actually this is the clincher. When it comes to working with Nuxt 3, there's a lot of other cool features with Nuxt 3, but just the fact that I don't have to see the little green and yellow, I think, colored bars, little loading bars in Nuxt 2 when you made a change and you had the server compile and the client recompile. You don't have that anymore in Nuxt 3. And that feedback loop, because of Vite, is super, super fast. And I really love it. Also with Nuxt 3, you get the Nuxy CLI tool, which does everything that the Nuxt CLI tool did for Nuxt 2, but you also get commands like add, where you can scaffold new files with some boilerplate code in it. You have commands like update for updating your project from different Nuxt versions, as well as cleanup commands for getting rid of cache files and things like that. So the Nuxy CLI tool really takes that CLI experience for Nuxt 3 to the next level. All right, this is where I really want to spend the bulk of my time with you, and that is taking a look at the file structure and some things that have changed between Nuxt 2 and Nuxt 3. So the file structure for Nuxt provides some really great conventions that are easy to navigate. And if you're onboarding a new person to your team who's already familiar with Nuxt, they can jump right into the project and know kind of where things belong just because of the convention that's there, right? But also because of the conventions, Nuxt is able to bake in some functionality based on the names of certain directories. Things like auto-imported components, file-based routing, and so on. So that all existed in Nuxt 2, but in Nuxt 3, we have some even further enhancements available. So let's take a look at those enhancements now and some of the changes that go along with these different directories. Okay, so the pages directory is a great way to create routes for your application based on the file structure. And this includes dynamic routes, right? But there is a change in the way you specify these dynamic routes between the versions. So in Nuxt 2, you would use the underscore to indicate a dynamic piece of the route. Well, in Nuxt 3, instead you use square brackets, okay? This isn't just a change just to change. The reason they've changed it in Nuxt 3 is so that you can support routes like this. So now we have the dynamic parameter actually as part of the route segment. It's not its own completely own separate route segment. It's embedded inside this other piece of the route segment. So this would be like mysite.com/edit-123-456, whatever you want to have ID be here. So now we can have dynamic parameters that are part of a larger route segment, which is pretty cool. All right, so the catch-all syntax has also changed just a little bit as well in Nuxt 2. It was an underscore.vue file inside of your pages directory. In Nuxt 3, it looks more like this. All right. And of course, we still use Nuxt link to navigate around our site as an SPA. Okay, so another thing that affects pages in Nuxt 3 is how we define our page meta. In Nuxt 2, you defined your meta on the object that's exported from your page component, right? This is using the options API. Things like middleware, transitions, layout, and even the head data for your page. Now in Nuxt 3, we use a defined page meta macro instead. And then for all of your head data, you use the useHead composable. All right. It's a fairly one-to-one conversion there, but you just need to know that the syntax looks a little different. All right, so now let's take a look at the components directory. So in Nuxt 2, you had to set this components option in Nuxt config to true in order for auto imports to function. In Nuxt 3, they decided, okay, this is a great convention, and it's just on by default. Okay, it's automatic. And by the way, composables are auto-imported as well. You have a /composables directory, and any composable defined there is automatically imported throughout your app. All right, another thing that affects your components is this client-only component. So in Nuxt 2, if you wanted to say only render a component on the client side, don't do anything on the server side, just skip it on the server side, you had to wrap your component in this built-in client-only component, okay? In Nuxt 3, you can do the exact same thing. However, you also have another option. That is, instead of wrapping your component in client-only, you can add a .client suffix to the end of your component. So this really couples that client-only nature to the component definition itself, which is really nice. Like if a component will only work on the client side, you don't have to remember to wrap it in client only whenever you use it. You just set that client only as part of the definition of the component itself, and you use it just like you would any other component, right? All right. On the same note, you can also have a .server suffix here that acts as a fallback for your client-only components. So for instance, maybe you have a client-only component that makes some kind of AJAX request and you only want to make that request on the client side for some reason. Maybe your server-side component could just have a loading message in it, and then on the client side, you could actually make your request. Okay, some things that still have remained the same. Lazy components can still be prefixed with the word lazy. all components can still be prefixed with the word lazy. And this is useful if a component is not always needed. For instance, it's only being shown on the page based on some condition, right? This delays loading the component until just the right moment and optimizes the size of your JavaScript bundle. Another thing that has stayed the same is the ability to combine your directory structure to assemble a component name. So here we have a components directory, and we have a base and foo directory, and then a custom button.vue. Okay, now whenever this component is auto-imported, it will be auto-imported with this full name here, base foo custom button. And duplicate segments are removed. So if you wanted to name the component so it looks exactly like how you would use it, but you still wanted to organize it in this directory structure here, you can do that as well. All right, so the layouts directory also has some changes to it. You can still use the layouts directory to define your layouts, but in Nuxt 2, you would use the Nuxt component in order to display your page within the layout. In Nuxt 3, you instead use a slot in order to display your page within the layout. And just to note here, you must provide a wrapper component around everything in your layout. That's because of the layout transitions in Nuxt 3. Now you can turn the layout transitions off, but yeah, a good rule of thumb is just to always provide a single wrapper element, just like you did with Vue 2, to all your layouts and pages as well, by the way. All right, another change is that in Nuxt 2, your error page was defined in the layouts directory. Now you put your error.vue file inside of the root of your project. All right, the next directory I want to take a look at is the middleware directory. In Nuxt 3, you can still use this to define anonymous middleware, named middleware, and global middleware. But once again, there are a few changes. In Nuxt 2, you would define your global middleware by defining it as by registering it with the router.middleware option in Nuxt config. In Nuxt 3, instead we define global middleware by appending .global to the end of the file name. Another change here is that in Nuxt 2, when you defined a piece of middleware, you would export a function and it would receive the Nuxt context. But in Nuxt 3, you export a function that's defined with define Nuxt route middleware, and it doesn't receive the context. It receives the to and from routes. There's the routes that you're navigating to and the route that you're navigating from. Okay. Also, if you want to do any redirects within this middleware, in Nuxt 2, you would call the redirect function, which was available on the context. In Nuxt 3, you would call the navigate to function, which is an auto-imported helper function. All right. So the plugins directory, sorry, just keeping an eye on my time here, guys. I want to be respectful of the other presenters as well. So the plugins directory also has a couple changes in Nuxt 2. We had to register plugins via the plugins option in Nuxt config. And then in Nuxt 3, they're just automatically registered based on their presence within the plugins directory. So pretty cool. Also, if you're registering a Vue plugin within Nuxt 2, it would look like what you see here on the right-hand side. If you're registering a Vue plugin in Nuxt 3, instead you need to access the Vue application on the Nuxt app. So the Nuxt app comes as an argument to the callback function. And on the Nuxt app, you can access the Vue application and then use your Vue plugin. All right, by the way, appending.client on these plugins still works just the same in Nuxt 3 as it did in Nuxt 2 to make it a client-only component or plugin, excuse me. All right, global helpers were commonly registered in plugins in Nuxt 2, and that was done via the inject function. In Nuxt 3, that is a little different. Now you return an object with a provide key on it. And anything that is registered here with provide or defined here on provide will be available as a global helper function that you can call in your template just like this. Okay. Though if you want to call it in script setup, now you have to use Nuxt app in order to extract that helper function. We don't have access to this anymore within script setup, right? All right. In my opinion, though, these helper functions are really not as useful as they once were. I would probably just use a composable instead. All right. Some other miscellaneous file changes. The static directory has become public, and the state management directory, the store directory, where all your Vuex modules were, no longer exists. Now there is a use state function available in Nuxt 3 out of the box, or you can choose to install Pinia for your global state management. Lastly here, a server directory was non-existent in Nuxt 2, but now we have this really cool server directory in Nuxt 3 where we can do things like define API routes. We can define server middleware that runs on all of your requests to your API routes, as well as any other server requests made to a page or whatever. And also a plugins directory where we can extend Nitro, the server engine itself. All right, so when it comes to migrating from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3, what are the currently available resources? Well, you could take a look at this presentation and see some of the differences and kind of know a little bit about what you needed to change, right? But there's also some work in progress docs on the official website. And to be honest, it's not the migration process isn't really fully documented yet, but this is what they have so far. You can get a feature comparison to kind of show you here what's different between Nuxt 2 and Nuxt 3 on the website. And you'll also notice here in the middle the Nuxt bridge column. So if you want to more incrementally update from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3, you can do that with this Nuxt bridge module. It'll bring Nitro, Vite, composition API, script setup, auto imports, and a number of other features that are available in Nuxt 3, and it'll kind of backport them over to your Nuxt 2 project, and you can kind of incrementally migrate. Now, there are some manual steps within this. It's not just installing the Nuxt bridge module and going on your merry way. There are some syntax things you'll have to change, but this is kind of a good middle ground from jumping directly from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3. Okay. All right. And lastly, as I end up here, I just wanted to let you guys know that here at Vue School, we do have a Nuxt 3 fundamentals course available. So if you are just getting started with Nuxt 3, definitely suggest that you check this out. We go through all the new Nuxt 3 features, and you definitely don't even have to be familiar with Nuxt 2 already to benefit from this course. Besides our Nuxt course, we have 855 other lessons in 45 other courses. And these are just some of the ones that I've been most excited to help be a part of over the past few months. And especially this rapid testing with Vite course, we've just released some videos for. This was taught by Anthony Fu himself, and I'm really looking forward to finishing that course up. There's some really great potential there for you to learn testing for your Vue apps if you aren't already familiar with that. All right. We also have this Black Friday sale going on that all of you have been aware of. And yeah, that is all of my time, guys. Thank you very much for having me here.
I heard all right, and then I got excited. I just wanted to be on screen with you, and voila, here I am. So, yay, Daniel.
Awesome.
More about what you were mentioning, especially because you're leveling up from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3. What is the feature that's most exciting for you?
Honestly, like the hybrid rendering stuff is is really cool, just because of the simplicity of it, how easy it is to configure that. But then the power of it, super flexible.
I dig it. All right. How about, can you use a browser-based CMS along with Nuxt content?
Yeah, I'm sure you probably could. It's not something I've tried to do yet. I have done it in the past with Netlify CMS and Nuxt content version 2. So yeah, you could probably do something like that with Nuxt 3.
Thank you. Is it possible to use a server route as a webhook for an ISR revalidation?
I do not know the answer to that question. Also use a server route as a webhook. I would say probably yes, but it's not something I've experimented with. So yeah, don't take my word for that on that.
Thank you. And in the case of hybrid rendering, can we render static pages programmatically based on a specific event, like a database update?
Okay, can we render state? Yeah, I see. I would think so, because in Nuxt config, I mean, it's a JavaScript file. You could make an async request there and figure some things out. Maybe, but I could be wrong on that. I'm not sure exactly when all Nuxt config like runs. If it's, I guess it would have to, because if you're booting up a cold server start, it would have to run from there. Anyways, yeah, I think there's also some hooks there available to like dynamically set up some of those route rules. So I would say, yeah, you probably could. But once again, I haven't actually experimented with that. So test it out and let us know on Twitter or whatever.
Yay. All right. Do you recommend using Nuxt Bridge when migrating from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3, or will it introduce more complications later on?
I would say yes, just because that seems to really be the recommendation from the official docs and from the core team. Based on everything I've seen on the website, I've not personally done the full migration process yet, so I couldn't speak from experience there. I only know based on what I've read. So yeah.
All right. Second to the last one. How can one invalidate a cached static page, say a page that only changes when content changes in the CMS or something similar?
Sure. So the cache does invalidate when you like rebuild your site. So if you're working with Netlify and you pushed and you changed to Git and your site redeployed, that cache would invalidate for those static pages. So if you were wanting to trigger that from your CMS, you could set up like a Netlify webhook and then have your CMS on publish or whatever, rebuild your site, and then all your static pages would be invalidated. And then on the first request after that, then it would reprocess, and then you'd have the cache from then on out. It's probably how I would go about that.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, what is something that you're grateful for?
Something I'm grateful for. I will say I am grateful for I'm grateful for my family, and I work from home.
That is a good one.
And they have to put up with me like all day, every day, saying, "Hey, y'all, I'm recording videos, or I'm talking at a live conference, or something like that. Please keep it down." And yeah, they're just amazing to live with and work around, I guess.
That is, I totally understand. I will be posting a photo of my coworker of my dog here soon. So I get that. Nice. And today she's just passed out and by the heater instead of,
ooh, that y'all might nice.
Yeah, y'all might hear her snore at some point because she's a bulldog mix and snores so loud. So, but I'm still grateful for her as my coworker. And thank you, Daniel, for being here today and also being the lead instructor. There's so much we can learn from you. And thank you once again.
Thank you, Jen.